I had no idea which one it is. I have no idea. 19 tips for out-of-state. Are we recording? 19 tips for out-of-state real estate investors. How to create $10,000 a month passive income in the Indianapolis real estate market. Buying 1% houses, $150,000 houses. This is tip number 5. We're gonna go over 19 tips. There have been 4 tips. If you're abducted by aliens and probed in the most horrific ways imaginable, I can understand how you missed the first 4. For everybody else, go watch the first 4. And even if you did, put a band-aid on and make it happen. Go through the first 4. This one, everyone builds on what we went over before. This is the power of leverage. How to turn $10,000 into $100,000 on a single real estate deal. Is this the leverage class? This is one of my favorite classes, you guys. How to create very big returns from a very small input. Let me move this guy. This gorgeous guy is going to go down here. He put him up there. Put him at the top. This is a new series just for out-of-state real estate investors. Passive Indy, passive real estate investors that want to make a passive income of 10, 30, 40, 50, 100 grand a month. And passive income, completely passive income. But this is generally 10 to 30 grand a month. That's where we start. You want to have at least $100,000 cash, have great credit. It takes at least 5 to 7 years, 3 to 5 years, 7 to 10 years, depending on our acquisition schedule. You can check that out in class 4. Went over this. So you need to have a passive income or equity. You need to know what liquidity and productivity means. I've gone over this in previous classes. You want to have a target and acquisition plan. So if you're trying to get into real estate and you want to get passive income, you should be able to say, I'm trying to get to 20 grand a month in passive income, and here's exactly how I'm going to do that. Passive versus active. What's the difference between passive investing and active investing? I train people, we do for fun, and we teach and train investors on how to create 10 to 30 grand a month in passive income, but this, or an active income, passive income, but this is for passive investors. The difference between active and passive investors is lead generating and lead converting. If you're not doing that, you're a passive investor and you're just going to stay at home and write checks basically for everything. And the most important thing for you to do there is to build your team. Lead generation, lead conversion, and fan base building. That's what an active investor does. If you don't have 100 grand cash, perfect credit, 3 to 5 years, you got to learn those things. It's the only way. Time, it's the most important. We always talk about this often. The single most important question you'll ever ask yourself is, how will I spend my time today? The most important thing you'll do with your time is to create passive income. The most important financial decision you'll ever make. It's the most important financial thing you'll do with your time is to create passive income. So the T3, we call it team targets, a timeline. You got to build your team. People, these classes are taking off. We're at 1,000 hits a day, by the way. Thank you so much. 1,500 across the board and like 100 downloads all together, all across the board, 30 different countries. Thank you guys so much. It's because of you. We love you guys. By the way, awesome mail rhymes with KO, BigRia.com. My friends and I have invented a bunch of ways to buy and sell real estate companies, all kinds of stuff. Go to BigRia.com. We've trained people. We've gotten more people to 10 to 30 grand a month than any group of people on earth, right? And we doing all kinds of crazy stuff. My life changed when I adopted my son who has special needs. That's how I met Anna. She has 2 kids with special needs, and now we're building the world's largest organization of special needs business owners. Go to BigRia.com. All the details of all the different companies and stuff we're working on are there. If you want to get trained, if you want to take you by the hand and train you, we can do that. There's a program for that. Go to BigRia.com. Those 2 main things. The other one is if you want to be a passive investor, go to BigRia.com for that as well. You can text Anna and apply and see if you're a good fit. So those are the 2 ways, that 2 main focuses of this project. But these programs, these courses, these classes that we go through are all free. They're amazing, beautiful, and brilliant, just like me. Did I cover everything on that page? Just supposed to be an intro. We test this intro with Google AdWords to see which one's compliance. All the hot points that I just hit was the one that worked. Well, okay, so you got to have a team, guys. If you're a passive investor, you want to stay at home, you got to build a team of people that are nuts, that are badass, that take over their market. That way, wherever you can invest remotely, you have a good team that's out there making you 10, 20, 30 grand a month. Your team should be able to tell you in one sentence what your goals are. He wants to own, $1.5 million worth of real estate that's producing 1% a month, 12% a year, meaning he's netting 8%, meaning that would be $10,000 a month in passive income. Where'd I come up with those numbers? It's class 4, I think. Tip 4. It's a class. It's for free. Go to BigRia.com. Have I said that yet? Go there. Do it now. It all comes down to how you build your team. Now, passive income is equity times production. If you don't, I often ask people, how many of you made 100 grand a month last year in passive income, or 30 grand a month last year in passive income? And no hands are in the air, right? I say, everyone raise your hand if you did not make 30 grand a month. Every hand's in the air. And then I say, keep your hand up if you're surprised. People kind of laugh and everyone puts their hand down because you're surprised. You're not surprised because you don't have equity in production. Passive income is equity in production. All generational wealth is passive income that's reinvested. If you want to create generational wealth, you got to create passive income. You have to. The reason you don't have passive, my skin stuff acting up. What are you pointing at? If you don't have passive income, you're going to have, guys, I've been working on my skin stuff. It's getting better. It's getting better. Oh my gosh. My ears, my tiny little ears. They call me Shrek. Can you believe that? No respect, I tell you. It all comes down to how you build your team, guys. All right. Are we ready for the, okay, so how to create a big return from very small input. That's what today's class is about. Go through the previous classes. Income tips. Tip number 1 was how to get realtors to send you 25 grand deals, how to close fast, basically. Tip 2, how to pay off your rentals in under 3 to 5 years. Wow, that's amazing. You should check that class out. It's for free. Tip 3, Burr explained how to buy 20 rentals and by recycling the same $50,000. I'm going to give you examples of deals. You should also go through our deal dissection series. We take all these things we're going to talk about. People will be like, oh, there's no such thing. That's not in the real world. The deal dissection series, we have over 100 videos now with deal dissections on real life deals, different phases of deals. We don't just say, oh, here's a deal. Here's how much money we made. We're working with the hero and walk you through every phase so you can see exactly how real life deals come together. Go through it, guys. 50 grand to buy 20 rentals. We actually have a few heroes that are doing that, using 50 grand, recycling it, and going to end up with a passive income income of 20, 30 grand a month. Crazy. How many houses do you need to make 30 grand a month? What's the exact answer? Go through that class. Tip number 4. It's amaze balls. Oh my gosh. I'm so beautiful and brilliant. It just amazes me. How to use a very small input to create very big returns. I thought that's what it said. Beautiful, awesome. That's where you put that over everything. What is leverage? Okay, so people always talk about leverage in real estate. What does it really mean? So leverage is controlling one thing with something else. The less you need of X to control Y, the more leverage you have, right? So we talk about leverage a lot. How do you turn $10,000 into $100,000? Here's the thing. If you want to go buy real estate, if you want to go buy stocks, for example, if you want to buy $100,000 worth of stock, what do you need? You need about $100,000, right? What if you want to buy $100,000 worth of real estate? Do you need $100,000? No, you don't, because there's built-in leverage. But let's talk about a lever first, because we've been doing this experiment. I'm going to tell you that part of the experiment is we tell people up front, oh my gosh, has this thing been in the way? That thing was in the way. There we go. Did you move it? Who's controlling this? Okay, we should go back then so you guys can see the beautiful, no, fine, just put it forward. The less you have of this, the less you have, see that? The less you have. Oh, let's start with the basics about a lever. This is going to be hilarious. Look, you can control, I don't know, man. I'm not good at doing any of that stuff. All right, the basics about a lever. These are simple machines. We have this experiment we're doing right now. When we talk about the compliance curve, when people actually picture the compliance curve, go through our signs on how to make 3 to 5 grand a week, putting out signs, and you picture yourself making a compliance curve. Like when you have a conversation and you know you're on the left side of that curve. So picture like the St. Louis Arch, right? You're on the left side of that, right? And so you know that there's the most resistance there. And just picturing yourself through that and realizing that I need compliance assets in order to work so people can walk through their own objection. And when you have conversations, if you picture that, you can have better conversations and higher compliance. It's an amazing thing. The same thing happens with the Nobody Mountain, right? So I've been talking about creating the standard for years. I've taught that for years, but it didn't really stick until one of our heroes came up with this term of a Nobody Mountain. So imagine you want a goal and everybody's at a mountain, and every time you do something, you take a step up on that mountain, right? So your goal is to have a Nobody Mountain, or have an accumulation of effort that is so far beyond what anybody else is willing to do. And then you at any given time, we always say, if you want to get in the 1%, ask yourself, you do in the last 24 hours, ask yourself, out of 99 people, would you say if we picked out 100 random people, 99 of them were not willing to work as hard as you did? Do you have remarkable hustle? A hustle that is actually remarkable. People remark on it. They're like, oh my gosh, that guy's hungry. Do people talk about your work ethic? They should be. And if they're not, then you're not likely to get in the 1%. Social mobility is dead. Income ascension is dead. Doesn't happen even in America. So you've got to bring something special to the table. The process of picturing the Nobody Mountain actually helps people do it. So today we're going to talk about a lever. We're going to go in depth with the lever, and then you're going to picture. You guys are all going to draw your pictures. You see that whole back there is like 50 pictures of it. That's why they're back there. We've had a couple of heroes have done this and had high, I don't know how much this is going to make it online, but this has been one of our I love these experiments because we see, okay, if you actually picture the lever, from now on you're going to start doing this. And when you go out and you make your calls and you do your recordings, picture the lever and where your leverage is at, and let's see how much of a difference it makes. You can get to 30, 40, 50 grand a month a lot quicker doing this, starting from zero. So what's a lever? It's a simple machine. It makes work easier. That's what a lever is made for. Lever greatly magnifies force by adding distance. We're going to show that in an example in a second, which you can actually see that up there. Mechanical advantage can be expressed as a ratio. We're going to talk about that. You did a great job with that. Mechanical advantage is force multiplication. Actually, you do a tiny little bit of force, but you control a very large amount. You have a very large output. Change the force or size or direction. Levers can be a wheel, axle, pulley, inclined plane, wedge, or screw. There's 6 different kinds of levers. I think it was 6. Was that 6? The wedge, screw, inclined plane, pulley, wheel, and axle, and a lever. We're just going to talk about the lever today. There's 4 parts to the lever: the beam, the rod, the fulcrum, the load, the force. Do we have the actual pictures? Okay, so let's move this. No, put the other one down. One of us has got to be in control of this. Okay, so first, there's 3 classes of levers. There's the class 1, class 2, and class 3. The whole point of this is not that you know what each one is, but that you understand that if you just change the relationship between the fulcrum, the effort, and the weight, you have a completely different machine, right? So class 1 is the fulcrum is in between the effort and the weight. So here's the effort, here's the weight. This is like a seesaw, right? So one person's over here, the effort's over here, the weight's over here. Imagine we have a 1,000-pound car over here. How much effort is it going to take to move that 1,000-pound car? It's going to take about 1,000 pounds, because fulcrum is directly in the middle. Examples of this are scissors, seesaw, crowbar, boat oars, pliers, where the fulcrum is directly in the middle. You have generally, in this case right here, you would not have a mechanical advantage to lift that, but there are differences in doing it because it does amplify the force you have because it applies it very locally. Now, let's go over the class 2. The class 2 is where the weight is in between the effort and the fulcrum. So what's an example of that? When do you put the weight? Oh, you already put these up here. So you guys see that, the yardstick? If we take the yardstick, imagine it's a yardstick right here. Let me move this down here for a second. This is going to be great. Okay. Oh my gosh. You put the most beautiful face in the world off the screen. All right. So imagine right here, this is that yardstick, right? And we put that 1,000-gram weight, and you put the 1,000-gram weight right here. And then we put that spring scale, and we want to lift that weight up. How much weight does it take? It takes about 1,000 grams, right? Because the weight is so close to the effort. But what happens is if you move that weight closer to the fulcrum, if you move it like over here, it only takes 300 pounds on that spring scale of effort to lift that weight. So automatically automatically immediately we're seeing a mechanical advantage, right? Of effort, 300 pounds of effort is lifting that 1,000 gram weight. And then as it gets closer and closer over here, eventually it's like 100 grams. 100 grams of effort lifts this 1,000 gram weight. Now, what looks like that? Well, you guys can see it's a wheelbarrow. That's an example, right? Where you have the weight here, the fulcrum is where the wheel is, the handles is where the effort, that's where you hold, but it's greatly magnified. Nail clippers and staplers are another example, right? So there's another. Okay, so here's another example. This is a class 3 one, right? So this is where the effort is in between the weight and the fulcrum. So here we have the fulcrum, here is the weight, the effort, and then here's the weight. What's an example of this? So if you hold that dumbbell up, that's a perfect example of the dumbbell, right? What do I have? My elbow is the fulcrum, right? The weight is in your hand, and in between is your forearm. That's where the effort is, right? So we have the fulcrum, the effort, and the weight. Another example, this would be a shovel. Also your arm and elbow, like when you're lifting weights, a broom, a bat, fishing pole, right? Because when the fish pulls, that's where the weight is, and then you're holding it. The fulcrum is where you're actually where your hand, and then in between is the force, the effort. It's not important you know this stuff. I know we had this is a quiz also in the mechanical, physics. The whole thing to take away from this is that when you change a tiny little change and the relationship and the location of the fulcrum, the effort, and the weight totally changes the machine that we're looking at. That's the point here, is how sensitive this system is to very, very small changes. Does that make sense? Okay, so now that's the point, is that tiny movements on a lever make an enormous difference. Let's look at this right now we're just going to look at this, the class 1, right? The fulcrum in between the effort and the weight. Now let's focus in on this and see how this applies to getting rich. Because you said we're going to get fucking rich with this thing. Get to the point, awesome. All right, right here we have essentially no leverage on this right here. This is where most people are at. So if we look at right here, we talk about a 1,000-pound car being over here, right? If you have a 1,000-pound car, where's this gorgeous guy going to go? Let's put him up there. All right, let's say you have a 1,000-pound weight right here, right? A 1,000-pound weight over here, right? So you've got a 1,000-pound, let's say 1,000-pound car, and you want to lift that car. If you have right here, if the fulcrum is in between, it's going to take about 1,000 pounds of weight. There's no leverage. Now, what if you put the fulcrum over here? It's still in between the effort and the weight, but it's very close to the effort. Well, now you have no leverage, but negative leverage, meaning in order to lift that 1,000-pound car, the amount of effort it's going to take is going to be more than 1,000 pounds. That makes sense? Now, and you can see this with the yardstick. We can see that the closer that we move, that we are to the fulcrum, the effort is the fulcrum, the worse off we are. Now, guys, this is the magic part. This is the part of the test where you want to draw. This is what you got wrong. Right here, high leverage, okay? Everything we're going to talk about is right here. This is the diagram you want to have. This is what you want to use in your mind. This is when we have that mental diagram, the mental model. This is what I want you to picture. Does that make sense? So when we're talking about conversations, dialogue, compliance, companies, all that stuff, this is what you're focused on right here. This is the effort is over here, right? And then we look at the fulcrum is way over here and the weight is over here. So it's effort, fulcrum, weight. It's still a class 1 because the fulcrum is in between the effort and the weight. But we want the fulcrum and the weight together, and we want the effort on this side. This is where we have high leverage. So if we have a 1,000-pound car here, it's going to take more than 1,000 pounds. If we have a 1,000-pound car over here, and this place, the effort is going to be a lot less. Because let's say this is what we talk about when we talk about distance. If we want to take a 1,000-pound car to 10 feet, we could go over here and lift 100 pounds of pressure 100 feet. We can take 1/10 as much input, but we can move it 10 times the distance. And that's how a lever works. That's why we can with 100 pounds of effort. Are we going to go over this? Is that on here in the next slide? 100 pounds of effort. Okay, if the weight is a 1,000-pound car, perfect. How much effort is needed? So in this case right here, this is 1,000 pounds. This is going to be more than 1,000 pounds. Here, it's under 1,000 pounds, just like we saw on the yardstick, right? If we put the weight and the fulcrum together, close together like this, we have the effort over here. We need less than 1,000 pounds. And this is where the magic happens. Because this right here is where everybody is with their job, right? Almost everyone that trades their time for money, this is exactly where they are. What amount of resources control a large amount of resources? If you want to make more money, if for the average person, they have to get paid more per hour because they have no leverage. They have nothing else they're doing. So their 5 hours controls 5 hours worth of money, right? If they get $10 an hour, that's it. They get $10 an hour. They have to go. If they have no leverage. If they want to lift 1,000 pounds, or they want to make $1,000 worth of effort into the equation. Here is negative leverage, by the way. How many people are here where if you want to make $10,000, are there people who have to make more than $10,000? Yes or no? It's a trick question. It's not really a trick question. Yes, exactly. Right. Credit card debt, loans, people that go out and do stupid things with loans. How many investors have you guys talked to, especially here in Indy, that tried the BRRRR, but they worked with somebody who was a dickhead, and they got a team of LCs and the BRRRR's not working for them, and now they're stuck with this high payment with a hard money loan. This is not good. What's happening now? If they want to make $100,000 or $10,000 a month, they really have to make $15,000 or $20,000 a month. If they want to move this 1,000-pound weight, they need an input that is greater than 1,000 pounds. This makes sense. Everyone understand what's happening here. We're talking about weight. We're talking about the same resources, whether it's time or money. This case right here, at the top right here, we have no leverage. This is where most people are at. But now with the investors who are listening to LCs, they have negative leverage. They want to make 100 grand. They have to actually put in more than $100,000. They have to make more $200,000, $300,000 in order to make that money. Here is that magic place, because now if we want to move that 1,000 pound weight, we need less than 1,000 pounds, under 1,000 pounds. How much less? Talk about the exact formula. If you want to go out and make, if you want to control $5 million worth of real estate or $1.7 million worth of real estate with that same $50,000, your effort is $50,000, but you control a much larger group of resources. Does that make sense? All right, so if the weight is a 1,000 pound car, how much effort is needed? Mechanical advantage. Here's the thing here. The further away the effort is from the fulcrum, the easier it gets. Remember, which one of these do we want? We want right here. We want the effort as far away from the fulcrum as possible, right? The more you move away from the effort from the fulcrum, the more leverage it has. The further we go away here, the longer this beam, the longer we make the rod, the more leverage we have, the less input we need. We're going to go over this more in a second. This is how 100 pounds of effort can lift a 1,000 pound car, right? 1,000 pound input, a tiny input. Remember, the entire point of leverage is a tiny input has a massive output. How does 100 pounds move a 1,000 pound car? Because we move it 10 times the distance, as we're going to show in a second, because that's what you do. But the fact is that you're taking a tiny input, you're controlling a massive output. This is why so many people are broke, because they stay up here or even down here, and then they think it doesn't work, or that, all kinds of nasty things come out of their experience. What's your point, Asym, that you can leverage anything? That's the point that we're making here. Okay, so that, right, I think we talked about this somewhat already, right? The weight can be anything. You can leverage anything, any resource like money, influence, whatever. But the single most important thing to leverage is, who already knows this? Who knows this? Okay, you guys already saw it. The single most important thing to leverage, you guys, the most important thing to leverage is your time. Are we still recording? You can always make more money, but you'll never be able to make more time. Most people's time leverage looks like this. They have no leverage. You want to be further away from the fulcrum and create what's called leverage time. The way to do that, by the way, is going to be, so here's some of the questions that we're going to keep going back to. What is the input and what is the output? How do we know we have leverage? We have a tiny input and a massive output, a 100 pound input, and we have a 1,000 pound output, right? The more we do that, the better off we're going to be. What is the input? What is the output? How does 100 pounds of force lift 1,000 pounds of weight? How can I increase the leverage with less and less input? How can I increase? You guys, you did what I did with the spelling. How can I increase my leverage with less and less input? This is the question we're going to keep coming back to when it comes to leverage, how we can make sure we get this right. How do you create and increase any kind of leverage? It's basically the same process. Remember, guys, talking about this, we want to move the effort away from the fulcrum. We want to move the weight closer. Does this have the second part up? Okay, so this is what we're doing. The three things we're always going to be doing here. Number one, we are going to move the effort away from the fulcrum right here. We want to have the distance right here, right? The second thing is we want to move the load, the weight, time closer to the fulcrum, right? And then we want to increase the amount of load that it can take. We have the extra one. All right, so we want to increase the amount of time. So if we want to get 100 hours, if we want to get paid for 100 hours, initially we may have to put in 100 hours worth of work, right? But as soon as we're done with that, we may be up here, the seesaw. We want to put in less and less time and get a higher and higher result. We want to get 100 hours worth of time, the benefit of that, by only putting in 1 hour, by only putting in a half hour, right? So how do we do that? How do we make that happen? This makes, everyone understands the challenge, right? And this is, we're mechanically speaking, the physics of this is what you're going to be drawing from now on. And every time we create a compliance asset, every time you have a recording, you're going to extend this lever. But just know, these are three things we need to do. We need to move the effort away from the fulcrum. Number one. Number two, we want to move the load, time. We want to get that closer to the fulcrum. And we want to just constantly add more time. The same result is creating a bigger and bigger, the same input is creating a bigger and bigger result. Does that make sense? Yeah. I know some of this you guys already went over, so we'll speed it up. So how do we go from this effort and time to this? Right? Where you have a tiny effort. You want to go from the seesaw here, which is where we all start. Are we still on the, is it still back yet? Yeah. Okay. So we have this process right here where it's a 1-to-1 to here, where you have tiny effort controls a very large amount of time. Time leverage is compliance assets plus team building. This is why we're going to go for our project, for the weekend project. You have to create a group of compliance assets. We've talked about which ones, the group of 555, the 333 videos as well, the 5 videos for the intro, 5 videos, questions they should be asked, 5 videos people are asking, 5 questions people are asking right now. We talked about that, the 5 parts of the video, and then the one part of the hook, those 5 videos. If you guys have seen it, check out the class on how to write articles. It's all covered in there. But basically, this is your compliance assets. Are we still recording? The compliance assets, we need to build our compliance assets and our team, right? This is what creates this time leverage, is to build our compliance assets. So from now on, every time we have a recording, every time we have someone on our team, we want to go and make a mark on you. Every one of you are going to have this leverage out, right? You want to try this experiment for the next 30 days. When you draw this out, what kind of a difference does it make in the clients you have, not just with yourself, but with your team as well? All right, does that make sense? This makes sense, right? These are 2 things we're working on constantly, our compliance assets and team building. Make sense? Okay, so let's talk about phone calls and dialogue. We should all go through we should understand what a beautiful conversation means, what it means to have a beautiful conversation. At the first time that you have your conversation, if you're starting from 0, if you have 1 phone call, then you're getting one. If you want 1 phone call, a benefit of 1 phone call, you have to have 1 phone call, right? Because you don't have any leverage. So that's where you start here. You have 1-to-1. And you keep doing that. Do it as a GXM, volunteer, whatever you have to get the fucking compliance. compliance, right? You have to be, the biggest mistake people make is they don't have compliance. They're trying to get other people to do it. You got to do it yourself. And it might be one call, it might be 1,000. It's not going to be one call. It's going to be quite a few. It might be, we've done the math now. How many conversations do you need to make 30 grand a month? I shouldn't be saying this. If we're recording, we probably shouldn't put this on there, but it's about 330 conversations total, including the conversations that you grew up and you have. But once every conversation you have takes about 10, 15, 20, 100 to get to the place where you should have a beautiful conversation. You should have a high compliance. And now what happens? We record that call, right? Once we record that call, first have your conversations. Know that you're right here, but know where you want to be. You want to be down here. So first have your conversations with the one-to-one conversations. But once you record that call, we train one person. Now suddenly we're building this up. Now that same recording can be used again and again to train your team. So now you've had that one call, but it's been recorded. That one call, you can use that to get the benefit from 10 calls, from 100 calls, from 1,000 calls. Remember, the first thing we're doing here is we're distancing, we're moving this fulcrum over here, and then we're going to distance ourselves. This bar is going to get longer and longer and longer. And it gets longer based on two things: how many compliance assets you have and the team you have executing on those compliance assets. Does that make sense? So if one person goes, this is over time, you have more mechanical advantage. The mechanical advantage, by the way, the formula for that is, let's say the car over here is 10 feet away and it's 1,000 pounds. Well, over here, it's 100 pounds, but look at this distance from the ground up. This is going to be, you're saying this is 100 feet, 10 times the distance. So it's only going to be 1/10 of the impact. So this is mechanical advantage. It's actually expressed where we're putting in 10% of the effort. So our mechanical advantage is 10. It's like 1 to 10. We're putting in, for every 1 unit of effort we put in, we're getting 10 units of output, right? It's about 10 times, 10x advantage here. What we want to track is how much is each call worth. When you have a phone call, we've talked about this, you can have, this is the only business where the leads advertise, right? So that's why it's so easy to make money in real estate. But we can start tracking how much each recording is worth, how much each conversation is worth, and you can mathematically track exactly how much time you have. How much time does every transaction, every deal take for you to make money on? This is why we use our hook so much. You use your hook effectively. Somebody sends you business. We have, what was it, the 6 hard money lenders now that are sending deals to Anna. 6 hard money lenders are sending about one deal a week, about $10,000 a week. I'm blown away by that, man. But this is also because of the hook and because of the fact that Big Ria is getting so much more traffic now, and it's become like an authority site in that world. That now, if you think about that, if that same call now, we're starting this to take 15 hard money lenders and see how much money it makes. But basically, it comes down to one recorded call on how to have conversations with hard money lenders is going to net them about $20,000 a week. That's what we're looking at. If we have about 25 hard money lenders that are sending us deals, we should be able to net about 20 grand a week. They should be able to net about 20 grand a week from a single recording. And that's what that chart is up there, that when they have this, it started here because one, you have to go through the hard money lender conversations yourself. And to have those 6 took, 100, 200 conversations, right? But now that you have it, record that process. Say, here's how we build a relationship with a hard money lender. Here are the 7 things you do when we first talk to them. Here's the email we send them. Here's the propaganda package we send them. Get all that stuff recorded, right? Once you record that call, one person does it, you start right here. But as you get more and more execution on it, you have your team and more compliance assets, it just grows. Does that make sense? Man, how many compliance assets do you have, by the way? I always ask people this. This is like the biggest determining factor on how much leverage you have. How many recordings do you have? How many recordings of conversations do you have? How many testimonials do you have? How many chapters from your book are you using? If you're not using that stuff, every time you talk to somebody, you have to repeat the entire thing. You have to go through this you're basically right here. This is where you have to go every single time you have a conversation. If you don't have compliance assets, think about what it's like when we send people to Big Ria. Big Ria is kind of a big deal just in general. But I mean, if you know us or if you talk to us, like, oh my gosh, people like, it's great to when she was talking about this earlier, when you're talking to people live, you guys should be milking the shit out of it, right? Because they look it up like, oh my gosh, like, especially when Anna had, how many deals has she done where she said, just type in whatever keyword we're looking for, whatever video, like Indiana real estate, the #1 channel for Indiana real estate. And when people go there, we have like private money and a couple other terms we rank for. And when they're sitting in front of you and they look it up, like, oh my gosh, there you are. It helps a lot. But if you don't have compliance assets, if you don't have shit that people can binge watch, right? Every time you talk to someone, you're right here. They have no idea who you are. You have no compliance, no positioning, and you have to constantly go through this one-to-one, no leverage situation again and again. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to be there. How many times are we going to move this up or put that up on the top? You get what I'm saying? So that is the problem that we have here. So if you start with that conversation, somebody goes to that conversation, right? And you have the conversation recorded as we talk for day 1, or you're right here. You have one if you want the output of one conversation, you need to have the input of one conversation. But what happens here? Look at this. Day 30, right? Now you have 1 to 100. You're having the effort of one phone call that you made that was recorded, but now you're getting 100 phone calls that are made. That's what we're talking about, 3 to 4 or 5 conversations a day. The end of 30 days, that's the exact chart he had out. His mechanical advantage was 1 to 100. He had one phone call that he recorded, and now 30 days later, he has the benefit of 100 phone calls that are being made for him. You get what I'm saying? Now what happens when we get out here? Day 90. What happens on day 90, guys? Look at this, massive leverage. So we have 3 places of leverage. No leverage, positive leverage, which is good, but then massive leverage, which is where we want to be at. And that is right that looks like this right here. This is where we have tiny effort, an enormously small effort. And look at this distance right here, because if this was a car raising it, 10 feet, now we're raising a car maybe 1,000 feet, right? So we're putting like half a pound of pressure, right? 1 pound of pressure can go, because we're taking 1,000 times the distance or 100 times the distance. We need 1/100th of the input to get. So I'd rather have 1% of 100 people's effort than 100% of one person's effort. This is a famous quote. J. Paul Getty had said it. Ford had said it. Several different people. Also, going back to, I believe, Plato. The old saying is, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand and I can move the earth. And this is how 1 pound of pressure can move the earth. If you have enough distance on the fulcrum. Guys, enough distance from the fulcrum. This is what we're going to be drawing. Does that make sense? This is what you guys are all going to be drawing right now. Every time when we record our calls, what happens? First, we start here. Once we record our call, we start to get positive leverage now that we have somebody on our team going through that compliance asset. Once we start adding our testimonials, once we start adding our book, once we start adding our videos, once we start adding the welcome email, once we start adding the follow-up email of what we do, once we start doing a GXM, hey, here's the 5 different people that we volunteered for. Here's the businesses that we worked for, that we volunteered to help grow, right? Every time we do those things and we record them, we capture them, and we have our team distribute those people, distribute those compliance assets. You build your arch, and your compliance curve, and you just keep getting further and further and further and further and further away from the actual result. And by the time you're here, a tiny effort, a minuscule, a microscopic effort, an effort that you did a year ago, 6 months ago, 2 months ago, right, is still producing for you right now. Does that make sense? This is how we create leverage. This is what we want to draw. So every time we put a compliance asset or we have a team in place, this is what we want to draw. Just keep drawing this out, drawing this out, drawing this out. Does that make sense? This is the project that we're going to be working on as soon as we're done here. Asymmetrical, very small input, very big output. We always talk about investing in the asymmetricals. How do you know you have real leverage? Using a very small number of resources to control a large number of resources, right? Less and less effort is lifting more and more weight. Your input decreases while your output increases. Your effort force moves away from the fulcrum, right? This is what you want to draw. Past effort creates residual passive ROI. That is where you really want to be, right? So are we still moving on this? All right, check this out again. I keep moving that. I shouldn't have said I was in charge of it. I'll put this gorgeous guy over here for a second. How you create and increase any kind of leverage, right? This is exactly what we're doing. This is what we're doing, constantly extending away from the fulcrum and creating higher and higher leverage. Another way to look at each part of the leverage equation, all right? This is another. So check this out. If we have the equity over here, we want to build a company, we want to buy a company, right? We put the equity over here, right? This is our fulcrum. The fulcrum would be we have our equity over here, we have our input over here. This is how much effort, time, or money you're putting into it, all right? Now, in between, it's just going to be relationships. The lever is the relationship you have with the company, and the fulcrum is the relationship you have with the fan base, because we need a company, right, to work with, and then we also need a fan base. Now, their relationship is probably not very good with their fan base, so we need to go through the nurturers, right? We need to nurture, love on them to build a relationship with their fan base, especially with the GXM. But once we have these 4 components, this is the tiny effort that controls the enormous amount of equity. This is where we want to be. We want to build, and this is why the relationship with the providers and the GXMs is so important. That's exactly what he was drawing. The better your relationship is, further along this line we can move. The further away from the fulcrum we can move. And the better the relationship is with the fan base, the more the closer that is to the equity. So think of it like that. Picture this in your mind as we go out and we create compliance assets. Do this again and again. Now, let's talk about the real estate investing part of this. Money recycle. How to leverage assets as a real estate investor. So if you want to go buy stocks, you got to put if you want $100,000 worth of stock, you put $100,000 in, right? But go buy a $100,000 property, you could put 10% in. So immediately, a very small input, $10,000, controls a very large output, $100,000 worth of real estate, right? But that's just the first phase of it. Second, we refinance and get that cash out, as we talked about, the BRRRR method, money recycler. So we get that cash out and then some. So if we have the $200,000 property is now controlled with zero money, because when we put on that, the deal dissection series, are we still recording? The deal dissection series you guys need to go through, because those are the real numbers, real life deals. If we put in 30, 40, 50 grand, when we refinance, we're pulling out that 50 grand, and then on top of that, like 20 or 30 grand. So your net result is that you didn't just put 50 grand in to control that property. You put in 50 grand, but you got back 70 grand. You got back 60 grand. You're walking away from closing with cash. Now you have a loan on it, but that loan is, the payments are being made by the tenant. You get what I'm saying? This is how we have so many heroes now that we're able to do deals with, and why people are banging down their fucking door, man. Keep this in mind as we do these deals. Take one of the deal dissections. Each one of you has one, and you're going to draw this out and see where along this line, what is the input? What is the mechanical advantage? Because think about it this way. If I put $50,000 down on a property that's $200,000, what's my mechanical advantage? What is that? Right. What is it times what? Times 4, right? Everyone gets that, right? 50 grand times 4, or 50 times 4 is 200, right? Yeah. Does that make sense? Right. So our mechanical advantage is 1 to 4, meaning 1 unit of input for every $1 I put in, I'm controlling $4, right? So I put in $50,000, I'm controlling $200,000. But when I refinance, I get that cash out. Guys, what just happened? I got that 50 grand back and then some. So I got 60 grand now, and I still control the $200,000 property, and I'm not even paying for that payment on that 160, right? So this is how we create passive. For our passive income here, this is what we're doing. But the third part is when things go bonkers, because third is the repetition. Now we take that same, okay, we use 20 grand in this case, take that same 20 grand and it's used to buy multiple $200,000 properties so you keep getting your money back. It's self-similarity, right? We did that deal the first time and we're just going to do the same thing again and again and again and again every single time we get further and further away. So if I have $50,000 and I control a $200,000 property, right? Mechanical advantage of 1/4, so I'd be right here. But if I did the same thing again, now my $50,000 controls $400,000, but I got my 50 grand back. I do it again, now the same 50 grand controls $600,000. Guys, I'm almost halfway up to our $1.5 million at 8%, meaning I'm already, in less than 90 days, I'm halfway to where I need to be. I have the potential equity, not the actual equity, right? I still have to pay off the loans, but I'm halfway to where I need to be to get to our 10 grand a month in passive income. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? But then I keep going. Now I keep going, the 50 grand keeps going. So now that same 50 grand, I can actually, this is our kind of our big thing with our leverage here. I can get to the place where that same $50,000 is recycled again and again, and I get to my $1.5 million, my forever fund, $1.5 million earning 8%, meaning 10 grand a month. Does that make sense? And then we can go even a step further because then we can go and get to the 30 properties. So you can turn $50,000 into 50 grand a month, 30 grand a month, 10 grand a month, 100 grand a month, or whatever. But in specifically the 30 grand a month would be 4.5 million at 8%. Does that make sense? We can use that. What happens every time we're doing it? We're just getting further and further away. At this point, we use $50,000 to control $0.5 million. It gets even longer. We use the same $50,000 to control $4.5 million worth of real estate. Does that make sense? So the mechanical advantage of that place is nearly infinite because you're getting the money back. But if we say just 10 properties at $200,000, that means we use that same dollar and we're not getting 1 to 4. We're getting 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30, 1 out of 40. Our mechanical advantage, this is what's used on the quiz. You have to figure this out when we use the math. We'll use real round numbers, but the mechanical advantage is 1 out of 50, 1 to 100. This is what you have to be able to explain, not the whole thing, the whole class we went through, but to our heroes and the people you talk to is that point. The way that you can get rich with this, with creating passive income, is because we're getting further and further away from the fulcrum. We're creating massive, massive leverage. Tiny input has a massive, controls a massive output. The same 50 grand can eventually control $4.5 million worth of real estate. Crazy, right? Our mechanical advantage is 1 for every dollar of input. First we control $4, then we control $10, $20, $30, $40, $50, $100. For every $1 of input, we're controlling $100 worth of equity. Does that make sense? Is that all clear? This is how we go about doing this. And this is how we want to chart all along this point. We're getting further and further away from the fulcrum. So what is the distance? Because remember, the reason that a lever works is because we're moving a much greater distance. We're moving the same weight, but we're moving at a much greater distance. And by adding distance, with less force is needed to move it, right? So the distance, 3 force kind of distributors here is time, repetition, and compounding. We need time, right? Just like when we create a compliance asset, you need time for it to compound. The second thing is people, your team building and compliance. We need to have people that we're building our team. We have people on our, if you're an investor, passive investor, you have your team that's continually doing these deals. And the third is technology, drip campaigns, automations, robots, things like that. The only way that you, whether you're active investing, like we talked about earlier, which I think we're cutting out, I don't know if that included, but the active investing was part about making, if you have like a telemarketer, you need to be a telemarketer at first, record those calls, and then you can have other people have compliance calls with your people. I don't use the word telemarketing, but just to make it clear, that is if you're an active investor, but it's going to come out the same thing, time, people, repetition. You need compliance assets, you need people on your team that are out there building compliance, and then you need technology, some way of like autoresponders, things like that. If you're a passive investor, it's the same thing. Your team has to be doing the same thing. And that's how you slowly move further and further along our spectrum here. That's what creates this distance here. Remember, the distance is how, by moving at a much greater distance, that's why we need to put a much smaller input in there. Does that make sense? For passive income seekers, your team is the ultimate lever. Think about it. You could go out and build relationships with, build relationships with lenders, agents, property managers, hard money lenders, appraisers, private money contractors, Airbnb hosts, hardware stores, lumber yards, construction equipment, surveyors, architects, remodelers, city planners, bankers, insurance agents, sewer scope people and repair people, landscapers, tree removals, dumpsters, storage units, RPA, inspectors, painters. By the way, this list came from, I just asked a quick lesson. Tell me the people you talked to in the last week. Tell me the people that we are employing right now. We have basically a de facto construction company now. We've gotten commercial deals. By the way, guys, if you want to create a passive income, you must have these people on your team. You have to. So you could go out and build relationships with each of these people, or you connect with one person like Anna, right? Who has insane relationships, 77s all over the place. And then what happens? You talk to one person, you have one conversation, and you benefit from thousands of conversations. That's leverage. That leverage, the real relationship equity is the only equity that really matters. And this is why you always want to get into situations where you're getting massive input. You're putting one tiny little input and you're getting this massive output. Did you put on the side? I'll move down the side too. That's how you can make sure that happens. One relationship and you can get the benefit of thousands of relationships. So rules for compliance with maximum leverage. Number one, if you're an active investor, you always want to speak to an audience. Speak to as many people as possible. Why do I do these classes, by the way? Why do I have anybody that wants to show up, right? We do this because if you're here, great. We will always record it. Number two is always record and then what you went over and then all the from now on. So from now on, what are we going to do? From now on, from this case, for example, what are we doing? This is self-similarity. This is why from now on, we want to try the lever for the next 30 days. Draw it out. Figure out what you're doing right now, how it's giving you leverage, and what's your mechanical advantage. Start thinking about that as you go into stuff. 3, always deliver compliance assets over time after the introduction, right? That's what enables you. When you record a testimonial, the ROI you're going to get on that's going to be over the next 10 years. So it's just constantly getting higher and higher return, right? Self-similarity formula for subtraction, passivity, and autonomy. But it's all the time. This is how you build an empire. Number 1, first do something, which is where you lose everyone, right? But then hire someone to do it, and then hire someone to hire someone to do it. That's what extends, right? That's what gets you further and further away from the fulcrum, because you're not even doing anything and a model's being built without you even knowing about it. Do something, hire someone to do it, and hire someone to hire someone to do it. That's the formula. Compound compliance and leverage begin right now. Number 1, you got to do conference calls if you're an active investor. This is, with passive investors, we do a call once a week. We make sure they're on top of everything. Maybe more than that if we need to. 2, recordings of all the calls. You want to have uniform execution. I should be able to call anyone on your team. They say and do the exact same thing based on the script, based on the checklist, scripts, and diagrams and drawings that you've shown. We changed that to drawing. It used to be the Wendy chart, but it's drawing now. 3, collect 77s in your email text list. What is the ultimate advantage? All a business really is just a checklist. But ultimately, Steve Jobs said a business is just to have a fan base, a base of loyal users. If you collect emails, but you don't email people, or you collect texts, you're not building a good relationship with people, that's useless. But if you do have that relationship, what happened, right? If you're selling mattresses, every day people have hope somebody comes in and wants to buy a mattress. But if you have an email list, you instantly email them. What do you have? Leverage. You send out one email, you get the benefit of sending out 100 or 200 or 300 emails. Does that make sense? That's what we're doing. All these things, whether it's emails or texts or whatever, it's just extending your leverage. This tiny input and a massive output. With one email, you're getting the benefit of 500 emails. With one phone call, you're getting the benefit of 1,000 phones. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, so how do we record our screens? How do we record? From now on, we need to start recording shit. Create compliance asset. Free resources for recording your screen. Screencast-o-matic. That sounds like shit, but that's like, is that the real name? All right, that's probably like the 90s stuff. It's got like animated GIFs on it or something. All right, screenrec.com, panopto.com, GetShareX. That's, I think that's the other one. OBS Studio. Let me put this gorgeous guy. Where do we put Mr. Gorgeous? You're moving at the same time as, no, okay, move it to the side. All right. So, OBS Studio. Now, if you're on your iPhone, go to Settings, Control Center, hold the record button, then tap the microphone, start and stop recording. You can do it on your iPhone. Guys, we need to start recording shit. If you're going to record something today, even if you've never recorded a compliance asset, on how to do something, because once you record it, you start to begin to get leverage, right? We got to record shit. Windows, hit the Windows button, plus G, then choose record screen. That opens up the gaming center. Also, you can use a snippy tool, take pictures, and you can also take out your iPhone, just record it. Apple QuickTime Player has a new screen recording. That thing's really powerful, actually. Record calls ghetto style. Put it on speaker and record on on your webcam, on your microphone. Just do that. Start recording your calls, go back, review them, but record your calls until you can have predictable compliance. And once it's recorded, once it's captured, man, now you can start getting that leverage. You can start extending your compliance, right? Make sense? Yeah. Okay, so more free resources here to get this done. 10 for resources for recording calls, videos, huddles. We use all of these. We use these constantly. So freeconferencecall.com is one, freeconference.com, dialpad.com. Zoom is a free version, no cloud storage, and limits of 40 minutes. You can buy the free version. Zoom is amazing. Google Meet is another one, 15 gig of storage, 1 hour sessions. It's free. It's crazy. They have 24 hours. It can be one-on-one, all kinds of stuff. Essential is another one. They have 24-hour conferences for 100 people, 10 hours. Can you believe this stuff is free? There's no excuse to not record stuff, man. Record everything you do. Google Hangouts, webex.com, Cisco, there's 100 people each, I think, on those. Skype, Uber Conference, which used to be Dialpad, or it used to be Uber Conference, now it's Dialpad. I think they bought them, or they merged, or maybe they just changed the name. Now, 7 paid solutions. You don't need this until you make money, but here's some paid solutions. Zoom, Skype, Google, all have paid versions that give you longer recording times. Nextiva, I don't recommend that. We have used that before, but you can do it. It's easy to do. It's not free. It's a voice over IP. It's just like Vonage used to be. GoToMeeting, QuickMeeting, Phone.com, all the same stuff. Guys, you don't need to use any of this stuff. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be something that you've got to get, that you've got to pay for to get this done. One of us has to move this. All right, guys, let's put the gorgeous guy up here. All right, put all 5 chins, more chins than a Chinese phone book. You know, some guys, it's a swelling that I got on my face and my neck and my skin, my chest from the skin stuff, but it's actually getting a lot better. So I appreciate the good thoughts and everything, the love and the energy that you guys are sending. All right, a few quotes here, a few things to keep in mind. Start leverage and add accumulation and fulcrum distance. Little by little, a person becomes evil. A person becomes evil as a water pot is filled by drops of water. Little by little, a person becomes good as a water pot is filled by drops of water. I like that. Slowly, gradualism, right? Buddha, emotional assignment. You look at one thing, but you see something else. One phone call equals 30 grand a month. That's the whole point of drawing these things out. Does that make sense? That's why we're doing this little experiment to see when you draw shit out and you start picturing yourself, what's the difference that happens? To see thank you. Paid attention. This is from the literature class. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. To look at something small and see something very big. To look at something mundane, to look at the ordinary, but see the extraordinary. This is really the point of life. That's from the William Blake poem that he had. But this is why, look at something as silly as one phone call, or having a recording, or having a conference call. That is when you add accumulation, when you add your compliance assets and your team building, that one phone call you have, putting out that one sign, but recording how you did it and how you picked the location and how you wrote up the sign, that little piece of compliance now sets you and your family up for the next 100 years. Look at something normal, to see the world in a grain of sand. Look at something small as a grain of sand. Look at something very small, but seeing something very big. When you really understand this stuff, guys, when you start building this stuff up, we have, how many people do we have in this group that have gotten to 30 grand a month like it ain't no thing? And we've done this for more people than anybody on earth, getting people from 0 to 10 to 30 grand a month. And ultimately, it is this emotional assignment, looking at one thing and seeing something else. This is thought control. This is everything we teach, man. I love this stuff. Those who don't have leverage will always work for those who do have leverage. When you combine ignorance and leverage, you get some interesting results. Warren Buffett. Leverage is everything. Don't begin to pry until you've got the long arm on your side. Oliver Wendell Holmes, the long arm. That's what we want to do. We want to get the long arm. We want to extend that arm. If you have time to complain about it, you have time to do something about it. Guys, this is easy stuff, man. All work is easy work. Tiny adjustments compound to create big results. This was the larger quote she had meant from Jeff Olson. So this is like the book review part. The things that take you out of failure and up towards survival and success are simple. So simple, in fact, that it's easy to overlook them. Extremely easy to overlook. Easy to overlook them because when you look at them, they seem insignificant. Again, that's what the LC does. They look at something ordinary. They look at something magnificent, but they only see the ordinary. You want to be the exact opposite. Be a champion. Be the badass. Look at the ordinary. See the extraordinary. It's extremely easy to overlook them. It's easy to overlook them because when you look at them, they seem insignificant. They're not big, sweeping things that take huge effort. They're not heroic or dramatic. Mostly, they're just little things like getting on freeconferencecall.com, right? That you do every day and nobody else even notices. These are the things that are simple to do, so simple to do, yet successful people actually do them. While unsuccessful people only look at them and don't take action. Things like taking a few dollars out of a paycheck, putting it into savings and leaving it there, or doing a few minutes of exercise every day and not skipping it, or reading 10 pages of an inspiring, educational, life-changing book every day, or taking a moment to tell someone how much you appreciate them, like Oz and Mail. Like hitting that like button, by the way. Guys, who's going to do this for you? Who's going to help you do this much? I don't know how much this video actually made it online, but guys, we love you. We love on you all the time. The least you can do is hit that like button. Make sure that this gets spread. Somebody could see this video or not, but by hitting that like button, you're telling the child molesters at Google that they should put this out in front of someone. Someone could be suicidal, and the difference between them seeing the video and not seeing the video is you hitting that like button. Do it now. Make this work. Don't you make me go back to doing porn. I'll do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. That's past. It's all in my past, I'm told. Or reading 10 pages of an inspiring novel, life-changing book every day, or taking a moment to tell someone how much you appreciate them, like Oz and Mail, BigReal.com. Do I have to go through that whole thing again? Hit that like button, and doing that consistently every day for months and years. Little things that seem insignificant in the doing, yet when compounded over time, yield very big results. I love this. Thank you for sharing this. This is exactly what we've been talking about, right? You could call these little virtues or success habits. I call them simple daily disciplines, simple productive actions, repeated consistently over time. That, in a nutshell, is the slight edge. That's from the book, The Slight Edge. Guys, oh my goodness, how amazing and gorgeous could somebody be? Awesome Mail, BigReal.com. Oh my gosh, did you not move? I said it was your turn to move it. It's been up there the whole time. No, put it on the... Oh my gosh, massive professionalism, you guys. Put it right there. Workbook exercises. Use the space below. You guys have this now. Draw neutral, draw negative, and draw positive leverage. You guys should be able to do that now. You should know what the seesaw looks like, what negative leverage looks like, and what positive leverage looks like. An example of each one. Identify variables to create increased leverage. You should know this. What creates leverage versus extreme mechanical advantage, right? What has normal, no leverage, negative leverage, and then extreme mechanical advantage. What are those factors in that? What everyday tasks do you do where the force can be leveraged? Whatever force you're doing. What are we basically by recordings? What can we do that we can record in the next 24, 72 hours to make sure that you're getting more and more advantage? Identify time, money, extreme leverage assets, and a plan to accumulate and deploy. We already went through all this in depth. Is that clear? Everyone's clear on the answer. If you're not, ask the person next to you. Right. We should be totally clear on these, you guys. This is what we're going to go through and make sure that we have done. Picture this as you build your compliance assets, extreme and mechanical advantage, and leverage time resources. You want to picture this over here. This is our equity, right? It's our effort and time. This is our right here. This is what we're going to picture. So from now on, everyone's going to draw this out. It's not going to be as dramatic at first, and then we're going to start labeling points on here that are going to give us higher and higher mechanical advantage, right? So we want to be able to say by the end of today, how many, so like 50 grand input and $2 million output, and how long is it going to take? How long is it going to take for me to have one phone call? Take this one phone call I'm recording today. How many phone calls do I need so I can have that one phone call, and I can have the mechanical advantage of 1,000 hours? I can have the mechanical advantage of, first, it's like 1-to-1. I want to have 1 hour of input and I want to get 10 hours of output. $100 of input and $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 of output. Does that make sense? This is what we want to get. This is our map, you guys. Hopefully that all makes sense. That's all clear. Power of leverage, how to turn $10,000 into $100,000 on a single real estate deal. By the way, if you buy that property for $100,000, if you put 10 grand in, you buy a $100,000 property, and let's say you buy $100,000 worth of stock and it goes up 10%, you just made $10,000, right? You made 10% of your money. But if you put $10,000 in on a $100,000 property and the value is now $110,000, you doubled your money because of leverage. Again, $10,000 controls $100,000 of equity. So I didn't even talk about the returns. We're going to talk about that in one of the next videos where we talk about calculating returns. If you have $50,000 that controls $2 million, $3 million, $5 million worth of equity that's producing 8%, suddenly your $50,000 is producing 50 grand a month, right? It's crazy, you guys. This is how you can do this easily. It's not difficult. Guys, go to bigria.com. We're all clear on our assignments. I'll get the assignments done. We're going to get this done by the end of the day. Guys, you can do this stuff at your house. You can do this at work. It's very easy to do. Start drawing this out and let us know how much of a difference it makes for you. Thank you so much. Bigria.com. Go there now. I love you.